Good evening and welcome to the League of Women Voters Presents. My name is Lora Wegman, City Editor at the Columbia Daily Tribune, filling in for Jim Robertson tonight. Tonight our topic will be sentencing reform and alternative sentencing courts. This is an issue that's been a big topic of discussion among everyone from politicians to court jurisdictions. With a lot of Americans in jail, numbers have risen. The U.S. has the highest prison population in the world. There's been a lot of need for this. Costs have been rising. And I've got a couple of panelists tonight who have experience with alternative sentencing on the local level and can speak to what efforts have been done here and could maybe be done in the future to address the issue. So starting from my far left, we have Kimberly Shaw with the Boone County Public Defender's Office. And we have Judge Christine Carpenter of Boone County Circuit Court. And they're going to speak a little bit about some of the efforts that have happened here in Boone County. So I'll start with you, Judge Carpenter, if you can tell us a little bit about how the efforts began here with alternative sentencing and where we are at this point.
Well, we've been very lucky in Missouri, not just in Columbia, but the state as a whole has always been a leader in the drug court movement. One of the original drug courts way back in the late 80s was in Jackson County that Claire McCaskill started. And we started our court here in Boone County in 1998. And I've been working with the court since 1999. We started out with about 20 people, and the court has grown dramatically. We've been very lucky to have a measure of success and a lot of support from the community and support from the county with regard to funding and also from the state. And so our program has grown, and we have expanded the alternative sentencing beyond drug court as well.
Okay, and so that includes also now a mental health court, correct, and a DWI court?
Correct, and we also have a reentry court. We have currently 4 alternative sentencing courts. The drug court and the mental health court are the 2 most venerable ones. We've had the mental health court since 2003. And we learned very quickly that a lot of the people who are affected by drug and alcohol addiction also have mental health issues. And so we established that second court. We then were lucky enough to get a pilot project funding from the state to have a reentry court, so we could have people who come back from the Department of Corrections also in a treatment court, which the idea was to make them more successful on probation so that they wouldn't go back to the Department of Corrections. And then in 2010, we started the DWI court.
Okay. How does a person qualify to go through these specific systems?
Well, each one of the courts is unique in certain ways. In drug court, we are a felony-only court. None of the courts accept sex offenders or, for instance, a murder case would never come through drug court. Drug court really originally started as an alternative for nonviolent first-time offenders. And as we have studied drug courts across the country, and there's extensive research, we've really figured out that it's easy to have a drug court with nonviolent first-time offenders. And we try to concentrate our efforts now on people who are a little further down the road, both of addiction and criminal behavior. And we get a lot more, I guess I would call it bang for the buck, when we work with that type of offender. So in drug court, we have people who are in that first category. We still take the nonviolent first-time offenders, but we also have people who are on probation, who may have already been to the Department of Corrections previously and have prior convictions. The mental health court accepts both misdemeanor and felony offenders. And the reentry court, everybody who comes back to Boone County from the Department of Corrections after being there for the 120-day program is placed in the reentry court.
Okay. So Kim, as in the Public Defender's Office, I'm sure many of your clients have gone through these programs and probably benefited from this. Can you talk a little bit about why this is a good option for some of them and what benefits you've seen?
I can. I have had clients go through both the drug court and the mental health court. I have had clients, I probably have more of the first-time offenders who have gone through it. I don't have as many of the individuals who've probably been to the Department of Corrections before, but I have some that are probably going to be going to that point. I think it's been very beneficial to them personally. It's given them the structure they've needed, the help they've needed. When you have a substance abuse addiction, it's very hard to beat that yourself. You can go through treatment, inpatient, outpatient. I have some that the families have gone through the tough love. Nothing was working, and yet drug court seems to have been a very positive experience for them. I know I have one client who graduated not too long ago that is working very hard to stay successful. He now feels like he's got tools that are going to help him to stay successful. I think that's probably one of the bigger benefits is he's getting some additional information, some additional education that he wasn't getting just through going through some inpatient treatment. The mental health court I think is extremely beneficial to some of my clients because I feel that if they can have some help with the mental health issue, and if they can have not only the help, but someone that is constantly monitoring them, making sure they're staying on their medication, they probably are not going to come back in front of Judge Carpenter or back in front of the courts. I have a few that feel like once they're on the medication, they're doing well, and they don't need to stay on that medication. And then it's a continual cycle.
Right.
When they're in the mental health court, you have an individual that's saying to them, I know you think you're feeling better and you're doing better, but it really is because of the medication. I need you to stay on it. If you don't, these are the repercussions. They didn't have that before. They have that now, and that has been very helpful to them. So I do think I have some clients that currently now I feel will not be back in the system because of these programs, and I'm hoping some that I have in the programs now will not be coming back because they are learning some tools that they did not have before.
Okay.
And they're having that help.
When you mentioned the tools for success, you mentioned, you know, helping them know when they need to stay on medication and how to be on the right track. What else does that entail? Is there counseling, job placement type help for in these alternative courts? What other kinds of treatment help is given as an alternative to, you know, serving prison time?
There's all of that available.
Okay.
I think one of the things that has been helpful to some of my clients is the counseling, is trying to find maybe some help for some underlying problems that they have turned to self-medication for those underlying problems. They're having some help in identifying those, having some help with those, so that it's not a vicious cycle for them to have those issues again, not be able to do what they need to do, so they turn then to the drugs or the alcohol to self-medicate and get them through those periods of time. They're having help with that now, and they're having help understanding what's going on with them.
Right.
And I think it's even helped the family. We've had some families who have tried to be there for their sons, daughters, nieces, nephews, and at some point have just thrown up their hands and are not sure what else they can do to help. Now they're understanding a little bit more about some of the issues and the problems the clients have had that maybe have led them to self-medicating, or with the mental health, why they might then go off their medications or not continue on their medications and then fall back into the same issues they had before.
Mm-hmm. So Judge Carpenter, do you have a sense of, in terms of how much it costs to run these programs versus the money that it saves keeping offenders out of the system and out of the cycle? Can you make an argument to just a taxpayer that says, yes, it's worth your money to put into these alternative sentencing courts?
Well, yeah, I can. I can do it both anecdotally by telling you that when we bring someone into one of these programs, it's like Kim said, this isn't just go to your counseling session and take your medication. We become highly involved in their lives. The degree of supervision is, in the words of the participants, almost to a person. They say, this is just overwhelming. There's so much that I'm expected to do and be accountable for. And I think the key word that we have is accountability. So we are not just saying, don't take drugs. We're saying, get a job, eat properly, find a stable housing, and we'll help you do that. What are you doing about transportation? What are you doing about child care? What are you doing about the child support you owe? What about the restitution that you owe? What about getting your GED? It's kind of a big picture. And we've learned a lot as we've gone through that, you know, drug use and drug abuse doesn't happen in a vacuum. There's a lot of other things that are going on. So we work with all that, and that sounds very expensive. It's important to know that nobody who works in the drug court field, on the drug court team, is specifically being paid by the taxpayers to do that, with the exception of, part of my salary comes, is used towards that, and the coordinators that we have that really do the day-to-day administration of the court. But all the other people on the drug court team, such as the public defender, the prosecuting attorney, the counselors, the probation officers, they're all just doing their job. And they have all volunteered to be on the drug court team. So, a lot of drug courts around the state and around the country, they'll have court early in the morning, they'll have court at night, they'll have court over lunch, so as not to interfere with the other duties that the participants have. So we really make a big change, and it's not costing that much when you consider, and I brought these figures because I wanted to be accurate with them. In the fiscal year of 2011, the incarceration costs in the state of Missouri were $22,852 a person. So for every person that's locked up, and in that year there were over 18,000 people locked up. That's what we're spending in corrections. If we have someone in treatment court, it costs $6,190 a year. So even though we are bringing them to court on a weekly basis, having them see their probation officer twice a week, testing them 7 to 8 times a month, paying trackers to visit them unexpectedly at home and at work, provide all the counseling and treatment, it's still a fraction of what it costs to warehouse them in the penitentiary.
Right. And when they are in one of these programs, are they in it for just a year or two? How long does that process take?
Again, that's different with each court. The mental health court usually takes a longer period of time for people to become stable and achieve the individual goals that have been set up for them. Drug court is a minimum of 1 year. And frankly, most people, I think our average is closer to 15 months. Okay. We go through a phase process and getting just acclimated to it, and then nobody can complete drug court unless they have 6 consecutive months of sobriety and they have maintained housing and employment.
Okay.
So that's what's required to be done.
Is some of the cost borne by the defendants themselves, and if so, is that a burden to any of them or a hurdle that needs to be overcome?
They all pay a fee. Mental health court does not. DWI court is very expensive because we have no funding for DWI court. The reason we have a DWI court is to allow people to have the potential, if they complete DWI court, to apply for a hardship license that they would otherwise not be able to get. But they pay for their own treatment, and it's $3,000 for the year. So, that's an investment on their part. We have been trying very hard to get funding so that we could have some public defender clients in DWI court, because not everybody can afford to do that.
Right.
But in the drug court, our funding all comes from the state, and the participants pay $50 a month for the time that they're there. And again, that's a lot of money for many people. However, everybody manages to do it, and I think that it's important for them to have some investment as well in their own progress.
Is that something, you've probably seen situations where people haven't been able to afford it, or it's been difficult for them to afford it, but if they do, then they're more likely to be successful in the program. Do you think that that's the case, Kim?
I think that's part of it. I also think when they've given a little bit to it, they feel like they're getting more out of it. I think it helps a little bit with the self-esteem, knowing that they put something into it monetarily. And I think, too, part of it is one of the requirements, I believe, in both courts are that they obtain some type of employment or they do something to further their education, GEDs. That's been beneficial, too, in the respect of that self-esteem, that self-worth has been built up. They feel like they've accomplished something. That's been, I think, extremely helpful to a lot of people that don't feel like they have.
Mm-hmm. One thing I think you often hear with people who have had legal troubles or even been in prison is having trouble finding employment afterward. And I'm guessing that these programs are a help when it comes to that sort of thing. Do you see clients having an easier time finding employment after they get through one of these programs, or is there job placement help?
There's job placement help during the program.
Okay.
I think that's been beneficial. A lot of times having a GED is beneficial in helping to obtain employment. So I would say that that's been a big help to a number of my clients.
Which probably reduces recidivism rates in general.
Which will, in the end, save money as well.
Right. So we mentioned earlier some of the other courts that are already in place here, the DWI, the drug, mental health, reintegration. I wanted to talk a little bit about the possibility of adding a veterans court at some time in the future. Judge, if you could give us a little rundown of where the process might be with that.
Well, we actually had a brief meeting today with some of the other judges and some of the county officials talking about potential funding for this court. We had a wonderful gathering of community supporters about a year ago where we told them about Veterans Treatment Court and asked them for their support, and it was an overwhelming response. We had applied for a federal grant from the Department of Justice to start a court, and we did not get that grant. So ever since then, we have been trying to find funding. Again, this program will be unique because as all the participants will be veterans, they will be able to receive their treatment from the VA hospital.
Okay.
So we won't have the cost of treatment. The VA will provide it. So we're looking for money for training and for the team, for the specific things that veterans would require. We're looking for testing money and tracking money. And also, another unique part of the Veterans Court would be that we would be assembling a group of other veterans to serve as mentors to the veterans who are in the program. And that has been something that when the first Veterans Court started in Buffalo, New York, that was a master idea, I think, and it's been very successful. So we have guys and women lined up, ready to be mentors that are looking forward to this, but they do have to have some training. And so there's some funding that we're looking for, and hopefully we'll have some good news pretty soon. But we would probably start the court with the people that we currently have in our other courts who are veterans.
Right.
And we would use those folks to come together to start the ball rolling. But we have a lot of people who sometimes don't even consider themselves veterans because they weren't in combat, maybe, or because of the status of their discharge. So to me, that's a catch-22. If you have drug and alcohol problems or criminal problems, and that's what caused you to have a less than honorable discharge, then you don't qualify for anything at the VA. But that's what caused you to not be able to be successful in the armed forces. So we're trying to identify those folks. And surprisingly, the high number of people that are veterans who are in the criminal justice system do have an honorable discharge.
Okay. Kim, is this something that you've seen a need for among your clients, and what kind of gap do you think this would fill in that might be needed?
I have seen a need, and I'm very excited to hear that maybe this is moving forward. I heard about it about a year ago, then didn't hear any more about it, didn't realize that the funding had not come through. I do think that there's a need in this community. We have a number of individuals who had prior military service that are involved in the criminal justice system. We have the VA hospital that has a number of benefits available for individuals to help them. Part of the problem is some of these individuals are to the point that they don't have the ability to even function sometimes in daily life. They're homeless, they have substance abuse problems, they have mental health problems. They're not able to participate in some of those programs on a regular basis. They can't hang in there with it because then they start having some issues. And again, I think this court would be very helpful because you have contact with those individuals. You can help them when they're starting to have problems with functioning in normal daily activities or normal lives. So I do think it's very needed. And I am very excited that that could be moving in the right direction.
Seems like there's, I guess, could be some specialized attention to situations involving PTSD or other things that are unique to veterans. So perhaps dealing with them a little bit differently. And you mentioned the mentors, which probably goes a long way toward that.
And we've also found that veterans, they have a code that they believe in that was instilled in them in their military service, and they seem to be more comfortable in treatment with other veterans.
Yeah.
And then again, with the use of mentors, working with other veterans, I hear so many times from people who are in treatment when they talk about their counselor or their probation officer saying, he understands me, he knows where I've been. And that's a big part of being able to identify. So I think that mentoring is really a rich part of how different the Veterans Treatment Court can be.
Right. And I know you've mentioned that that's something that's happened nationwide and has been popular. I'll shift the conversation a little bit toward a wider look at sentencing reform and alternative sentencing around the country. This is something that's gotten a lot of attention. Some states have tried revamping some of their laws regarding criminal sentencing. Missouri, I think, has made some minor shifts, but maybe hasn't gone as far as some other states have gone. And I wondered what you all think about whether some of these efforts are starting to work. I think sort of the rising prison populations, there's some evidence that maybe that started to flatline. Maybe that's an indication that these attempts have started to work. What is your all sense? Either of you can start if you think things are going in the right direction or what you think should be done next.
I guess I don't know that that there's not an increase in individuals. That I guess I don't know that I would agree that with the changes that we've seen a decrease. I don't know that that's really happened. A lot of the changes are individuals who have not been through the system before, and probably I think it's very beneficial to them what the outcomes are for them now. But I don't know that it's really affected the prison population, and maybe I'm wrong.
Well, there's so many factors that go into this, and any judge that you talk to will probably tell you that at some point they were told, we don't lock up the people that we're mad at, we lock up the people that we're afraid of. And we get mad at lots of people. It can be very frustrating to have someone who you see coming back and back and back and back. But, there's only so much prison space, and there's only so many dollars that you can spend. And like I said, with this cost of $22,000 a person for 18,000 people every year, is that really how we want to spend our money? Right. Sending people to prison for driving while revoked, or not paying their child support, or various other things. And, they're all laws, and we want everybody to obey all the laws. But at some point, we've got to be a little bit smarter. And I mean, Judge Price, who has recently retired from our Supreme Court, was a great proponent of drug courts. And he made a great speech a couple of years ago about how we don't need to be tougher on crime, we need to be smarter about crime. And so I think there are efforts for that. And Kim and I were talking earlier about a seminar she attended last week with a guy who is trying to analyze folks that are in the criminal justice system with regards to the risk and needs analysis. And who are the people who really need to be locked up, and who are the people who just need to be given some treatment, given some direction, and moved on down the road and not locked up. So there's a lot of research going on. There's a lot of talk about it. We don't have sentencing guidelines, mandatory guidelines in Missouri, which is a good thing. But we do have a lot of people locked up. The probation and parole, which is part of the Department of Corrections, is constantly coming up with new innovations to help people be more successful so that they don't go back to the penitentiary. And the reentry courts are one of those things.
Okay. It seems like a lot of this discussion is very budget driven in terms of, and I realize that's a major factor in this, but also there need to be considerations, I would guess, of safety and, who does need to be locked up versus who does not. I mean, how much of that do you see being a part of the conversation?
Oh, it's a huge part of the conversation. We are lucky enough in Columbia to have such a good group of people in our court and in our law enforcement and in our county government. And I don't think many people realize this, but we have a meeting every month at 7:30 in the morning to check out our county jail population, why it's up or down, what can we do to save the county money so that we're not paying money to have people housed out of county. And it's an ongoing thing. But again, we also have an independent judiciary, and so when somebody needs to be locked up, we don't let them go because we think it's going to be too expensive.
Right.
So we have to balance it out. Who should be better served by some of these alternative programs, and who really needs to just be taken away from society for a while.
Right. We've just got a couple of minutes left, but one thing I wanted to say to kind of wrap this up, what do you think it is that has made Boone County successful in terms of alternative courts? Is there any particular factor, or is it a large combination of things?
I think we've had wonderful support from our community and from our county office holders. We've been provided with a building. One of the older buildings that the county acquired, they have let us have it for our alternative sentencing. So all of our staff is housed there. We have our own testing laboratory there now, which is saving us lots of money. Rather than having to send the stuff off to be tested, we have our own lab. We can have AA meetings there. We have juvenile things there. We've always had great support from our county office holders. We have great support from the community. We have employers who are willing to hire people who are in drug court because they know they'll be good employees, because they know we're watching them. So we've just had wonderful, wonderful support. Yeah. And that's a big part of it.
All right. Well, thanks very much to both of you for talking about this tonight. Kimberly Shaw and Christine Carpenter. Thanks to all of you for watching. Have a good night.